start soon. The fact that he was here at 22 C3, at least I already told you. But the year between 35 C3 and 34 C3 and 35 C3, also known as 2018, had a lot to talk about. And our next speaker will give us an overview about the things that at the German and the European level were taking place and what will happen in 2019. Please welcome with me the head editor of Netzpolitik.org, Markus Beckedahl. Yeah, good morning. I hope my voice will hold. The new edition of the best and the worst in net politics in Germany and the EU from yesterday and today. And my promise, I only have 14 minutes. Many topics that are relevant I had to leave out, but enough of them have been left as well. What's new from next year is that we have a government. Last year we had the failed coalition talks. Now we have a grand coalition, the Conservatives and Social Democrats. That is Merkel 4.0. What's new, or what is old rather, is that they still don't have a digital minister. And as we know, the best digital minister doesn't help at all if we have idiots sitting in there, as we know from the EU. The good news is that after 13 years, Angela Merkel, as the Chancellor, digitalization in net politics has suddenly become a topic, has suddenly been on the agenda. There is a lot of work and there are expert circles. We kind of lose sight at Netzpolitik.org. I will just read out a few that have been founded. There's the Digital Cabinet, Digital Council, Digital Commission, the think tank Digital Work Society, Learning Systems Platform, legal things and artificial intelligence, future of education. Those are just a few. And that's not bad, but the problem is that there is a lack of coordination in the government. Now, the person responsible for coordination is Dorothee Bär from Bavaria. She is responsible for digitalization in the government and for net politics in the government and communication to the outside. She thinks that data protection is a disturbance. Sometimes she regards bus timetables as a problem that have nothing to do with personal data. And there's this nice quote from her, what she wants, what she wishes for. I quote, nerds from outside have to give us their expertise and their creative powers for a time for the common good. So, dear government, it could be so simple. Why not just add a few civil society representative next to the industry lobbyists? Why do all the parties in parliament invite nerds as experts, but the conservatives, CDU, CSU never do? It could be so easy, and then the nerds will come because the offer has been standing for several years. We just have to accept it. The digital agenda is now called the implementation strategy, but what's lacking, unfortunately, is the strategy, which is not new, but the government, 1 or 2 months ago, presented their implementation strategy, and I took several approaches to comment this on Netzpolitik.org, and I didn't know where to start. It's such a weird collection and such a mishmash. All ministries send us whatever they do concerning digitalization, and then that will just be lumped together. That's what happened. And at least you see that something is happening, but not with a lot of strategy. Let's come to the weather. Now, the bad news first. There's a storm coming, or for the target group that knows storms from the internet, this image. A running gag for many years that I've been doing Netzpolitics is the EU copyright reform. Meanwhile, it's the second reform that I have been following, and the EU copyright reform is on its last stretch. The one divisive issue are the upload filters in Article 13 and the ancillary copyright in Article 11. Now, with the ancillary copyright, I cannot really explain what the logic is. I haven't quite understood it. The question that we ask ourselves is at Netzpolitik.org, can we still link to other articles with a headline without having to pay a fee? Not even the politicians can tell us that. Great work was done by Julia Reda and her team. Without her, it would all have been so much worse. A huge thanks to her. But mainly upload filters are a problem. They are a bigger threat to freedom of expression than the network enforcement law that was passed in Germany last year. To define what is shown to us and what can be published is a problem. And the interesting question is, where are the democratic controls when it comes to what the filters let through and what they do not let through? And about that, there'll be more later. Now, the ancillary copyright, the German version of it was the top expert into the EU. We actually said 1.5 years ago on Netzpolitik.org that this would not be compliant with European law. So our readers will know. We did go to court about this as well, because we wanted to know in the decisive session of the cabinet 5 years ago who was there, who took part, and what was discussed. Because back then, the Chancellery Minister Eckhard von Kleden was responsible and his brother was a lobbyist of huge German publisher Springer, so we saw a conflict of interest there. So we went through until the Federal Administrative Court, and we only got a partial judgment in our favor. So we will get the list of participants. The government never wanted to hand out that list of the people that had been there at that cabinet session, because with the reasoning that the behavior of individual ministers could have been gleaned from that. So we fought that through. What we didn't get is that the protocols that are protected for 30 years will be handed out. They stay in secret. What is also new, Girls' Day in the Interior Ministry. This is the famous picture of Horst Seehofer as he started his office. And that's not the only problem. The Grand Coalition has given us more surveillance authorizations than any other previous governments. And they now go into the extension round, basically. So we had obligatory upload filters as part of a censorship infrastructure, and they are in place already. There are, at the EU level, we've just had the debate as a consequence of the EU Internet Forum. I think I talked about that 2 or 3 years ago, 3 years in Hamburg. That was a meeting between people from the large platforms and EU security officials and politicians, and privatized law enforcement was the idea, and they wanted to introduce upload filters, and they did that, and most platforms have installed upload filters of some kind, and now soon there will be the regulation to prevent terrorist content online, and in our opinion that is the same thing that back then we prevented using the Censursular meme with Ursula von der Leyen, the then minister, and our demand is, the law expects providers to remove content within 1 hour, and that will only be done through upload filters. That's the only possible way, and whether that will help, and there will be instruments for automatic recognition. So where then is the outcry if the very same thing happens that was in the German Censursular debate, and no one's interested? That's a huge problem. Horst Seehofer, the Interior Minister, brought this on the way, but he won't be talking about this anymore. There was a conference of EU Interior Ministers where the EU Council resolved or passed that idea, and the Austrian Interior Minister, in place of Horst Seehofer, said that the internet was a fire starter, a negative enhancer. There should not be a new Islamic State on the internet, and gaps should be closed that had been closed in the real world. Those were his words. So what is terrorist propaganda? It's an interesting question, not really clarified. But there was a case when at least part of the political spectrum was of the opinion that that was terror-related, and that was debate about the Hambach forest, which is a forest that is being raised for lignite mining, And that included climate protests, and there were discussions from ministers saying that these will be close to terrorist content, so these might be filtered out automatically. And how this works in practice, we have researched. There is a hash database that is live, and there are 50,000 hashes in there. Hashes are digital fingerprints of content that has been marked as terrorist, and these are administrated by Europol and added to this database. And we wondered what the democratic controls were, and we asked the EU Commission for that. That brought this all along the way, and those people said, "Oh, I don't know." And then we asked Europol, and those people that actually insert all that data, and they said, "Oh, no, we don't know." And therefore, we have a database that feeds those upload filters, supports them, and we have no democratic control because no one's interested in what happens. Once something is in, it could stay in there forever, and we can't even talk about it because when uploading this automatically will be deleted, and we don't even know that something exists that we should talk about. To the next item on the EU level, there's a lot happening there because the EU legislative period is ending in May. Elections are coming, so many projects are on their final stretch. And then from March, April on, there'll be campaigning. And there is a project for e-evidence at the EU level. I think we had a talk about this yesterday. And the idea behind that is to equivalent to the American Cloud Act to make internet operators within 6 hours hand out the users' data to authorities, otherwise fines for up to 2% of their global income could occur. So if that goes through, there could an EU security authority could call a German internet provider and tell them, give us the data of this Hungarian opposition people that you host, and you have 6 hours to respond. How high is the likelihood that the provider will then take legal redress and face the risk of a fine up to 2% of the global turnover? And this project this weakens the options of authorities to defend against violations of basic rights done by EU authorities, and this is something for legal nerds to consider. And it wrongly assumes that metadata are less sensitive than content data, the usual problem. And the option gets into play that no judge needs to approve, and the question is, what are the rights of the affected people? And as I've said, hosting providers are actually left without protection to the authorities. I found this picture from 2017 in Karlsruhe when the Constitutional Court started talking about state Trojans, and the state Trojan now is called source surveillance at the source, and is now going to be forced through laws at the federal state level in all these 16 states. What we understand to be a state Trojan, which is a highly complex system of black markets where security holes are sold from dubious sources. The state Trojan software then uses these security holes, is armed with them. Now this, to many politicians, seems, well, state Trojan is like a telephone that you buy at the retailer, and you put that onto the computer. So we have to explain more what this is about, because still, in the name of security, there's a massive IT insecurity that is being created if the state Trojan is pursued, and that is the wrong way.
And on top of that, this state Trojans is another example of how surveillance authorization is first put into place and then extended. We have researched how state Trojans are used. Originally, the argumentation was for heavy crime like murder, and well, we found out that most targets are actually drug related, and I think another drug policy would help more than a state Trojan at this point.
Ja. Gibt es demnächst bei uns im Merchandising-Shop?
So you can find that in our merch shop soon. The police laws have been discussed by Constanze Kurz, and they are in almost all federal states by now, and so they are used at impending danger, so without an actual danger of crime. So in Bavaria, you can be locked up forever soon. In Bavaria, this has been explained by CSU logic. So this supports civil rights, and this has been the former and I think still current Interior Minister Hermann, but that's bullshit, right? It's just. But the police laws have a big advantage because finally tens of thousands of people go onto the streets in support of civil rights, not only in Bavaria but also in Brandenburg, in North Rhine-Westphalia, in Saxony. So here's a chance for new, bigger civil coalitions.
Ja, wenn zur
And on the topic of coalitions, our old debate of license plate registration. So the government argues with
particle dust.
Thanks. And this entire so the government totally failed here, and the answer is more surveillance. So the argument is that that license plate scanner are the only practical way of enforcing the ban of older vehicles. Of course, there are milder ways of enforcing this bans, and if our traffic minister doesn't know, then that's his problem, not ours.
This is about environmental protections.
Of something that doesn't photograph the faces of the drivers. Here's another quote from Andreas Scheuer. So,
the traffic minister, transport minister.
This must be.
Okay, what is called privacy. No one is talking about a surveillance state. Well, we do. That too was in 2018, a lot of protest against the trial of biometric video surveillance at the Südkreuz station in Berlin. Many creative images. The scientific test of that surveillance technology, in our view, is a joke, as the Chaos Computer Club, among others, found out, but we should discuss this at a more basic level, not just about error rates, because those will improve in time, probably.
And baseless mass surveillance of the open spaces by biometric ways endangers our freedom.
Is
2018 is a year where we are able to talk to computers and they are talking back to us. And 2018 is the year where people basically put bugs in their own homes by their own free will. And the discussion around Alexa, Google, and what's their name, it's just starting. And there are a lot of questions we need to discuss. For example, where's the data stored? Is it on German servers? Is it on US servers? So with Prism, all the security agencies can access those. Who can access those in the first place? How secure is it? Where's the point where Alexa and co store everything forever because it's just more convenient for both the user and Amazon? Do we train with Alexa a German, a global voice biometric system so we can be recognized everywhere on the basis of our voice? Because everywhere there are Alexa devices. And do these devices recognize me wherever I am? And when we're training such an artificial intelligence, so it knows us better and understands us better, and we get used to this. And when do we reach the point where we can't leave the Alexa and the Google world anymore because we trained them so much onto ourselves that we would need to start over when we leave them? And what could possibly go wrong? That's been asked by the CT, a German computer magazine. So someone did a GDPR request and got voice data from someone else. And so we need open and decentralized solutions which we can trust so we can actually use this technology at home. That's what I wish. Otherwise, we know from the big data protection agencies we can learn a lot. For example, Mark Zuckerberg blocked his web camera. 2017 wants its bot debate back. So we had this talk from Constanze and Ingo earlier about disinformation. And this debate about disinformation is a debate we need to have, but social bots is really the least of those problems. So like with state Trojans, we have the problem that politicians have this fuzzy idea of what bot is, and they are talking past each other. For some, it's Russian trolls. For some, it's artificial intelligence of a chatbot, which you are talking to when you are, talking to customer support, which is an entirely different debate. But you need to ask politicians, what are you talking about in first place? And what's clear is, when you're talking to an artificial intelligence, then you need transparency. That's a consumer right, and we need to enforce those. But we also need transparency in studies that spread panic because they're talking about social bots that no one can actually understand. Because by now it's common to call any Twitter account a social bot if more than 50 tweets are made per day. Right, so we have a lot of problems in this. We have the problem in the society that we have a lot of people with too much time on their hands and too much anger, which easily reach these 50 tweets per day, but that's not a reason to enforce clear names. So we have Cambridge Analytica and Facebook. It's not the first data scandal from Facebook, and it won't be the last. So we have counted 21 scandals, but just 2 or 3 days later, Facebook released new features, and all the journalists were busy with those new features. Cambridge Analytica is still carrying on, and it shows that Cambridge Analytica is just the tip of the iceberg. It's at one of maybe 1,000 companies which act in the same way and which are collecting data and in the same way are using this data to manipulate people on Facebook or elsewhere. And congratulations for everyone who switched to Instagram or WhatsApp in protest of Facebook's practices. So that brought us a debate. How do we
break up? How can we regulate platforms to enforce more consumer rights? Breaking up Facebook is one necessary way, and Google too, because they've just simply become too powerful. And as an example, Facebook and WhatsApp, when they bought WhatsApp, they promised the EU Commission that no data would be shared. Well, I would doubt that and simply take that back. And this is all about platform regulation. which rights do we enforce, how do we strengthen the rights of users against platforms, against a take it or leave it policy. How about media diversity? How do we create competition, and how can we have privacy-friendly alternatives and further them? That's something where we have far too little from politics. 2018 also showed us that Facebook kills.
In Myanmar, in Nigeria, everywhere where the company earns money but doesn't feel responsible to support fact-checkers with the right information. That's a problem too. And 2018 brought us a nice movie, The Cleaners, about content moderation policies in big concerns. So here you can see that in 2018 that's a Netzwerkdurchsetzungsgesetz.
Network enforcement law.
Does less damage in practice than expected, because platforms are deleting everything anyway, which doesn't conform to their community policies. And that's what we got from the transparency reports. Okay, let's go to slightly cloudy. From tomorrow onwards, everyone will have 50 megabits per second broadband connections. At least that's what Angela Merkel promised in 2017. Who doesn't have 50 megabits? So look, even among the nerds, there are plenty who don't have that. So I know plenty of people in Berlin who can't go past 16 megabits even if they wanted to. So here we have Klesen-Görne, one of the most popular,
most well-known holes in broadband mobile connection.
So the telecom, as a PR gag, erected a cell phone tower. And do you remember these slogans? If this doesn't work by tomorrow, well, with 5G, all problems will be solved. Well, we'll see if 5G will actually come.
And whether we all have gigabit connections. Also, billions of support money were promised. After 4 billion were made available, we can say that 2 million euros of those have been spent so far, some of them to consultants. You could say that broadband extension will actually support PowerPoint bingo more than anything else. And there's a bit of progress regarding zero rating offers. At least there are no court judgments. The stream on offer from Deutsche Telekom is in violation of net neutrality, but the problem remains that zero rating as such is not seen as a violation of net neutrality, and we need clarification there. It's not just telecommunications providers that have made their hands dirty in the net neutrality debate. It's also the organizations that take part in zero rating programs and get themselves a competitive advantage this way, because they are getting premium access to customers. And that in particular, I'm referring to public broadcasters that unfortunately have changed sides in this debate and take part, or at least are negotiating to take part. Shame on you, public broadcasters. We have an AI strategy to involve civil society. Hasn't been tried in those meetings at the Chancellor's office. It was industry lobbyists most of all. In the consultation, there wasn't even a button that someone could click on to be part of civil society if you were registering. And I think research for better anonymization of big data and research on privacy by design and by default as a condition is sadly lacking. Another topic, that's 2018 was the year that many companies for the first time actually dealt with data protection. There was a lot of insecurity. Lots of cease and desist letters were feared. Not many came, but the detail still hasn't been clarified, as is always the case with large legal complex compromises. But at least there are improvements for users. There is the market location principle where you can go to the courts at home. There are large fines and large damage payments and support from the supervising authorities. And we have a new public sport, which is GDPR inquiries. And the website is German Deine Daten, deine Rechte, Your Data, Your Rights. Meanwhile, Max Schrems is trying to try this market location principle because he in Austria is now trying to take Facebook to court, and Facebook think they still want to be taken to court in Ireland, where the office is. Also, congratulations to Andrea Vosshoff, the Federal Privacy Commissioner, on the 7th of January. If her term will finally be over, we'll have a successor, Ulrich Kelber, who seems much more active, which isn't really hard. So that might be an improvement. But one thing we have to call for much more consequently, there are many politicians calling for a doubling of the staff of the Interior Secret Service. Instead, we at least need a doubling of the staff of the Data Privacy Commissioner, because these people defend our constitution much more. Now, to the EU privacy regulation, that's the small sister of the General Data Protection Regulation in the EU Parliament. With a one-vote majority, there was a vote for more users' rights. It's now in the EU Council and it's getting stuck there. And our government was one of those that did actually take part in all the blocking. The EU privacy regulation could give us different things. No data processing without consent, more protection from online tracking, privacy by default in browsers too, for example, limits to online tracking, more transparency for state access. Of course, governments don't want this. We should discuss which values innovations should bring. What are these great data innovations if users don't know what happens in the background? And that's something, another reason why we need transparency in tracking. And also, the Digital Pact is coming, or it won't, or maybe. Good in principle, but again, 20 years late. As so often, the problem with the Digital Pact might be that it's mainly seen as an investment support for Microsoft and Bertelsmann and the like, telecom. And we know that the best equipped schools will be of no use if teachers don't know what to do with these machines. And what is also missing is a consequent strategy for open source lesson materials. That's something we should look for. Yeah, running gag every year. Freifunk initiatives could be registered charities. There was another vote in one chamber of parliament. It's now in the main chamber of parliament that is reformed. Grand Coalition, go ahead. That's not only something to do for voluntary engagement in the digital sphere, but also something against the digital gap on site. Now to the nice things.
There are a lot of nice things. So we are celebrating the open internet. One of the nicest science citizens projects was a bicycle meter. They had the sensors which were delivered to 100 bikers in Berlin, which measured the distance to cars over a long time span. Because technically cars need to have 1.5 meters distance to bikes. So when we are driving bikes on streets, we are dependent on cars holding themselves to that distance. And this project showed nicely that even with Science Citizens project, you can, on the one hand, do nice and interesting things, but you can also start a public debate. And this model should be probably extended to other things. One of the other nice projects this year was Open Laws, ofengesetze.de. So originally these things were protected under copyright, and you basically needed to pay to access those. But thanks to the Open Knowledge Foundations, they just scraped everything and put it on Open Laws. Offenegesetze.de. And now it has been announced that this will be put on the internet from the start. So that's a great success. That's only a first step. Also, legislation should be open and accessible. We made progress on open access. With Project Deal, German
science publishers Were approached.
So we are financing science, and they are financing with our tax money a couple of private publishers. So they publish these results, and well, you could do it differently, but we haven't so far. So now a lot of universities don't want to pay the publisher Elsevier because it doesn't want to take part in that deal. But here too, it's clear that open science needs to be open. We need real open access, and well, at least we're on the way there. The whatever institute?
Open knowledge? Oh, I don't know what institute it was. To research on social consequences of digitalization, and I think that's good, and without any irony. But again, it's at least 20 years late, but better late than never. Then there was for the first time, there was the Bits and Trees conference, where the environment movement and the network movement for 3 days talked to each other, came together. That is another bit of progress. We had a sustainable IT conference some years back, and the problem then was that the environmental movement didn't really know that they were also affected by digitalization, but they have got the message by now, at least part of them. And this year we had 800 people in Berlin at our Das ist Netzpolitik, This is Netzpolitics conference. The first took place 5 years ago, and back then everyone in the audience and on stage were about as old as me and male, and this time, for the first time, I was about the oldest. Most of them were younger, and it was much more female, which is a nice development, which shows that we do not have any problems with new people. And that's why we will go on and have another conference on the 13th of September. And at the same time, or just after, we'll celebrate our 15th anniversary of netzpolitik.org. And another thing, Hans-Georg Maaßen, the head of the Interior Secret Service, who had been heavily implicated with right-wing politics, has finally gone, and we are still there. And we've grown a lot. And if you want to support us, because that's what we live by, we depend on people giving us voluntary donations so that we can have an open offer. There's a silent SMS option for donating. You seem to have to send a message with the text Stille SMS to 81190, but then of course you can also make regular donations through your bank account. Anyway, never give up. 2019 will be a tough year. At the beginning of the year, with e-evidence, the terror regulation, and the EU copyright reform, we have 3 big things at the EU level that will be bad, and the German government is getting heated up to get more surveillance laws on the way. So controlling power in the network is getting worse on each front. So fight for your digital rights, enjoy the conference, get informed, get active, and get home well. Thank you. Yeah, and also, I hope you've enjoyed the translation. You've been listening to Sebelis.
And Strangecliff.
And Markus says we have stickers and bags. Okay, anyway, we like your feedback as translators. C3T is our hashtag. C3Lingo is our Twitter account. Thank you for listening. Oh yeah, questions and answers. Please line up behind the microphones. Those leaving the room, please be quiet so that we can hear the questions.
Aus dem Internet haben wir die erste Frage.
One question from the internet. And the internet, there's insecurity whether the fact-checking and the filtering by Facebook you like or you do not like, and how this connects to the rejection of upload filters.
Not at all. So I don't connect that at all to the EU upload filters. I think it's important that and I think it's right that there is democratic fact-checking institutions, even in platforms like Facebook. I don't think it's okay that Facebook thinks that they are free and get money for that. So especially in countries like Nigeria and Myanmar, where they get a lot of money for that and don't take any responsibility for all the fake news they get there. And that spreads really quickly there, and that leads to pogroms and genocide. So there needs to be more work done here.
Please wait collecting your bags until the talk is over and the Q&A is over, please.
Wenn es noch weitere
If there are any more questions, please line up behind the microphones.
Okay, Jute
All right.
Fragen, das ist auch ein Weg.
It will only be a bag if you ask a question now. That's another way.
Okay, wenn es keine
Okay, if there are no more questions, then surely you will be available later for all these people. Thanks. There is a question on microphone 4. Okay, and a follow-up question to the previous one. Where do you see the limit between Facebook's responsibility and their censorship? Because that is a difficult thing. If Facebook takes action, whether it's fight for something or not.
I think the fundamental problem is that we are having two approaches. On the one way, either you are a provider or you are media, then you are liable for what's happening. And with Facebook and YouTube and etc., with monopolistic platforms, which are exactly in the middle, which we need to regulate with a third way, because of course they have a certain responsibility. But I don't want that Mark Zuckerberg also needs to legally liable for my Netzpolitics website.
Facebook page.
Right. So we need new approaches to regulation to solve this problem. So the answer is much more complex.
Thanks a lot. Please, a huge applause to Markus Beckedahl.